the recording? Okay, so it's recording. So I pretty much like want to go over, how the new system works because actually I'll arrange the build to just give you like an overview. Because the new settings UI is built on a new generalized system that we will later also use to rework other pieces of UI, like the inventory, file browser, the component browser, even the inspectors and lots of other stuff. But settings UI is currently the focus. But a lot of the pieces, they're very generalized, so they'll be able to like be used for lots of different things. And a lot of this work for these systems, it's building, is essentially extending on the work of like the entity interfaces that were like made for the audio and video players and other things where we have an interface component and we build the actual item. It's built like in-game rather than it having been constructed from the code. The old set, like, well, the old UI pretty much, has the same problem. It's like whenever there's like a list of things, all of that has to be built from code, which is really painful to do. It doesn't really lead to like good UI. Whereas like once it's in game, like it's much easier to kind of iterate on it. The only difference is like with the, with something like a video player, you only have like, one instance. You don't have to worry. You have like lots of items that might be coming from lots of different sources. So we don't want to be like manually building every single individual setting. So instead, what the system does is it has sort of like a template system where we build the building blocks. Right now, if I go like here to the settings, this is very like bare bones. This is mostly just kind of testing the functionality, and all of the building blocks for this, they are built from code, so it doesn't really look like much, but it shows like, the functionality. The overall like structure of the settings, it's inspired like, if you're familiar with, say, even like, Android or iPad tablet, or like even like when you go to like Windows 11 settings and so on, you have like the categories on the left, and then like you have the individual like, settings on the right. You can like switch the categories, and again, like, it doesn't look like much, but the main thing is like around the functionality. There's also a piece missing. There's gonna be like a search bar. I can actually give you like a quick like sketch on this, because the way I can imagine this kind of working is, like we have the main panel, we have like a search bar here, like this will be able to search, and then like you have like breadcrumbs, for example, settings, something, say audio, in case it goes to nested settings, and then like, there's a bunch of categories here that the user can select from. They can have icons on them, and then there's the individual like setting pieces, like when we open it up. So something kind of along these lines. So the overall structure is kind of like provided. It's all gonna be kind of constructed, but the part I need you to start focusing on and experimenting with is building the individual blocks. So for example, we have stuff like sliders, there's stuff like enums, there's stuff like, if I go to user interface, like, well, it's not working spiral. Let me actually do one thing. So instead of here, this is just for testing purposes. I have created a template testing, and if you start this essentially spawns the settings UI in world, so you can kind of more easily play with it. If I open it up, I'm gonna deselect all. So like if I select this should make it easier to see. The settings will not work in world, like it'll just show, but like, I cannot actually change anything. But it should give you like enough to kind of, play with it and see how it works. So if I open this up, and I'm gonna go here. So this is a sample that's constructed from code, but like we'll actually reconstruct all of this like in game and set it up. If I go here, so there's the canvas. There's if I go here, it should be here. There's a bunch of components here, but the UI is built on something called data feeds. And data feeds, they're essentially like sources of items that don't say how the items look. They just say what type of item it is and how its values are mapped. And right now there's only a single type of data feed that's like really polished, and that's the settings data feed. And essentially generating, like dynamically generating feed of items that are for the settings. The part that like you need to like kind of worry about is like there's data feed views. And the views, essentially, they take like the feed of the items and they are responsible for like, you know, generating like the actual UI elements. So for the settings, I've added a type of view that's called a root category view. And what it is in principle is that the root categories, they're always displayed here. And then like you can open the categories on the right. And later on, like we can add like, I'm gonna add like more types of category views. For example, you know, we have like ones that are like trees, like, you know, that you'll find like in the inspector, or maybe like, you know, we just browse it, like it's gonna work similar to inventory where you open the browsers and so on. But right now this is the one that's used for settings. Then the way the view actually generates, the actual UI, you can see it has like a reference to the feed. That's the settings data feed. There's the path that where it currently like is. So if I, for example, select MISC, you see it goes to MISC, and there's nothing in MISC. Select privacy, there's some stuff in privacy. The path can be like nested, so like if I go like deeper, like there's not really anything here. You don't need to worry about this part super much either. But what you do need to worry about are these two things, which are template mappers. So these reference items called, which are like template mappers, and this is actually where the individual pieces will plug into. So there's two. There's like one which maps items that are in this area. So there's like, you know, these items, and there's another one which has templates for the root categories. So these are like pre-assigned here, and if I look over here, like you can find both of them here. So there's data feed item upper. It doesn't need to be on the same slot, it just needs to be kind of referenced. Actually, it would be even like, you know, better like once we like make them in game, have them be on a separate slot, so it's not all kind of like, you know, bunched up. But if you look at the data feed item mapper, so this one has a bunch of entries, and these entries determine how will things be mapped. So for each entry, there's a matching type, and essentially specifies what type of item is this template for. So this one only has like a single type of item. There's probably gonna be two at least, because the categories, they can also be grouped. But right now there's only a single one because there's just one type of item in the category, and it's the data feed category item. And then has a reference to the template, which is template for this type of item. The template, it's over here. So if I open this up, you can see it's like disabled. And the template is essentially like a template for each one of those individual items. And each template, you know, you can put whatever you want into it. It gets duplicated and placed into the wherever it's supposed to go. And then there's a interface. And this kind of, they work, the principle is similar to like the entity interfaces, is like where you essentially, you refer where different stuff goes. So for this one, there's item, for example, item name, and this is referencing the text. So you can see like the text is kind of being referenced for that. There's some other stuff, item key, you don't need to like worry about that. Actually, for this one you cannot do. So for the item key, that's sort of like the unique identifier of the item, and because this text is supposed to open the category, you see there's a button on it, and there's a set data feed category, and there's a category path, and this actually references that path. So when this gets instantiated, the path gets filled with the appropriate key that the category is for, and the content like of the text gets filled with whatever the label is supposed to be. There's some other fields, for example, they can have icons, so you can, you know, set up like a blank like image, and then you say this is where the icon goes. The other part is there's also view, so some of the components, they need to know which view they work with. That's, for example, the set data feed categories, so this one gets filled with the view. Let me actually show you another example, so I can show you how this kind of works. So for the actual items here, there's a lot more types. You can see, like, you know, there's a whole bunch, and we'll probably need to add more. There's also like another data feed category. We don't have subcategories, so this one doesn't matter, but let me have a look. There we go. So there's a template for a slider. So we want to match the data feed slider. This is for float type. So sliders, you know, are sliders. So if I look at the matching type, that's slider, and the template is the feed slider interface. And this is essentially the template for how sliders are gonna look like. If I look at the feed slider, this is the template that's been kind of made from the code. I can open it up, you know, it has a bunch of other stuff, like it does, you know, whatever UI is needed for the slider. And there's the feed slider interface. And this interface, it will have, like, you know, stuff that's more specific to sliders. So for example, we have value. You just point it to where the actual value is. There is like min and max. This is like the minimum maximum value. You point it, you know, to where these go on the slider, however, like you set it up. And it's gonna, each slider is gonna get configured through this interface. So if I go here, you know, there's like the typical slider component that you would use. There's like, you know, layout elements, like whatever's like necessary to make like a individual piece of slider. And if I like make some modifications, say, so I change like the base color, so I open this up, I will make it red. And maybe I want to change, you know, how the handle looks, so I open this up, and let's say I change the offset to make it twice as big. Do 32, and now if I open up this again, you see now they're all different. Like it reflected like whatever changes I've made. So pretty much like whatever change, like whatever you set up as the interface, whatever you set up as the template gets, you know, put in there, and it gets automatically set up to like work with whatever values it needs to be. Like when you're making the template for a slider or for individual elements, you don't need to care that this is even for settings. All that the interface is defining is it's very like abstract values. So if I go back here, it's like pretty much, you know, this is where the value is, this is where the minimum is, this is where the maximum is. This is like the bare minimum for a slider. And like everything else, like through this interface, everything gets set up appropriately. That way, if you build like, you know, a template for a slider, we can then use this, you know, for settings, but say once we start reworking the inspectors, we can now reuse the same template for a slider for the inspectors as well. And it's gonna work the same way without even having to modify the template. And it's like one of the kind of like, you know, powers of the system. It works in similar principle for like the other pieces of UI, that's for example value fields. So if I go here, you see there's value field interface. It also has a value, and it also has like, you know, the same command ones list, for example item name. So this specifies where you know, where the label goes. It doesn't need to provide the label on itself, but you know, it can, so it's kind of up to you like which ones you use, but some of them might be necessary for it to actually works. For example, if you didn't set up the value, then it effectively becomes like useless because like it doesn't know where to put the value and it cannot actually change the value. But some of them you don't need to, but like they would be like overall good to set up. But it's also something we can kind of iterate on. So like, you know, like you can set up just the basics and then like we can add icons to the templates and other stuff. Actually gonna ask, are there any questions so far? Because there's quite like a lot of information.
Makes total sense to me.
Okay. So
very good too.
the next part I'm gonna cover, I think like the main thing like after is, you know, some I'm essentially doing sort of like info dump like of this. What I want you to do is like kind of play with the system so you can, you know, you can understand intuitively a bit better how it works. So this is like my made this like template and
has a question, by the way.
oh, say again, please.
Does the has icon? They're saying, does the has icon field potentially act as a Boolean check?
Yes, that's a Boolean check. So, so if for example you make an item, you want the item like the template, you want the template to be as flexible as it can be. So, you know, for example, there can be a slider and maybe it has an icon. So like, you know, you maybe want to put the icon somewhere. But also you know, you want it to accommodate for cases when there's no icon. So if you need to like, you know, check that, like you have a convenient field here, you just point at the boolean to true, so you can enable and disable parts of it. Or if you want to get a step further, some of the interfaces that will have cleanup references. And what cleanup does, you point it to a slot, and if the icon is not present, it'll just delete it. That way, like you can completely like remove and like not have like unnecessary hidden pieces in the UI, which can help a little bit with optimization. The other part I kind of want to go with the system. So like you have like, you know, the interface and you have different types of elements. You have like, you know, sliders, there's different types of fields. There's like, you know, fields for strings, fields for floats, fields for vectors, there's enums, there's toggles. For example, you see here is data feed toggle, and it's pretty much this one's just a checkbox. Where's the checkbox? Under content. Oh, there we go. Button. So this one should, yeah, there's the checkbox. So like the checkbox, it's this one's, you know, it's very basic. It's not like super nice looking, but this is like, you know, where templates come in, where you can make like a really nice checkbox, maybe like, you know, with an animation, and we just point the interface to like where the you point the interface to where the value goes. So you see this one points on the state on the checkbox. And you can construct these like completely like, you know, completely from scratch, which actually like for the proper like interfaces, I'll probably ask, you know, that we construct these from scratch rather than like using these pre-made sort of templates, because these are kind of like chunky. But they are like provided here, so we can kind of experiment with the system and get a like better understanding of it. The next part that I want to cover is like you can see, for example, we have like, you know, slider here and there's a label, and you can see the slider is actually contained like we probably don't want to look like this because it doesn't look super nice, but I pick like a element where it's contained like in this visible box, just so it's like easier to see for the testing purposes. But you see it's like in a container, and then like the whole settings, this is also in a container. And the way this is achieved is like, if I look at a slider, you see it's it doesn't actually have any container at all. It's pretty much just a slider by itself. And the way it works is because like no matter the type of the item, like if you have like, you know, slider, if you have like enum, the container's gonna look the same. So we don't want to be like defining the container multiple times, because if we want to make change to how the container looks, then we'll have to like, you know, we would have to update all of these individually, and that would get painful to do. Especially more painful as like this list will grow. So for that reason, the template system, it also supports something called composition, where it can compose the final template from multiple template pieces. If I go back to the slider, and you can see on the feed slider interface, there are two fields called parent container and child container. There's also nested items. I'll get to these a little bit later, but the thing is, there's a parent container, and it actually points to another interface, which this slider interface is essentially asking, I want to be put inside of this item. I want to be put inside of this template. So when the slider is instantiated, it will make the container first, and then put the slider in that container. That way, we have only a single definition of the wherever this goes. Like, we have single definition of the container template, and all of these items, like the data feed toggle, it references the same parent container. And if I look at the container item, this is a template for it. And you see there's like an image, and there's feed item interface. This one doesn't really care about much. The only thing it specifies, and that container needs to specify to work, is where the children go. And it's just referencing itself because it wants whatever item is to be put in this container, this is where it will go. So it essentially just puts it, under itself. If I make changes to this container, for example, I'm gonna make it blue, and I will regenerate this, you see like all of the containers are now blue. And I didn't need to make changes to any of the individual pieces. I just changed it in a single place. If I change it to like this, all of this is changed. I'm actually gonna cancel, so I can, change the spacing, for example. So, there's the vertical layout. So the container, because the container can have multiple items inside of it, I can, say I want, oh jeez, I didn't mean to do that. I can, for example, if I go here or go here, say I want more spacing here, so I'm gonna change the padding left. I'm gonna change it to say 64. And now if I regenerate this, you see now all of these have like a padding. I can do this, same for the right side. So this kind of lets me control how the containers look like. And it's only, it's defined like in a single place. I can change the structure of it too. So I could, for example, say add a child. And pretty much it can do whatever you would do when constructing UIX. Except like the only thing is like, instead of building every single piece explicitly, you're providing sort of templates that are being kind of combined dynamically. If I go, what did I want? Like transform. So I'm gonna put this here. I'm just gonna do gradient image. Just wanna do something that's very visible and just do a bunch of random colors here. Save. So right now, I'm still leaving it. So there's not a gradient image that's already part of the template. So if I regenerate these, let's see. Is this being generated properly? Feed item interface, it's putting the children. It can have already like pre-existing children in there. Oh right, this needs to have layout element. You can actually look, if I look at the generated thing, data feed group, you see like all the children are actually there. So it is like duplicating it. I just need to add layout element, blind, there we go. So let's set the width 32. And now you see like whatever I made, it's put as the first item there. But I could also, you know, say like I define this to be bigger, and I will say I want the children items to actually go inside of that. So if I change the child container to be this child, it's probably gonna look weird, but now they're being put like inside, and it doesn't work quite right because I haven't set up proper layout for this. This one needs layout too, so if I do vertical layout and regenerate this, now this is better. It's looking horrible, but hopefully this kind of helps demonstrate like how you can play with it and how you can structure this whole thing. One thing I would actually recommend doing, the templates that are sort of pre-instantiated, they contain the label. So for example, the slider comes with its own label, and I mostly set it up that way because it was easier during testing. But what I actually recommend doing is we make the label part of the container itself, because that way like it's defined in a single place and I have kind of better control of how it looks. So you can make like a template for the container and put a label there. So I'm gonna remove this one. I'm actually gonna add a new child, and let's say I call this label. And then I go, then I add text. I'm gonna give it a nice color. I kind of gonna make it red or yellow. Save. So now these have labels, so this also needs layout element. Let's see. Does the label have text? It's got testing here. This needs, what does it need? Every transform. It is being put in there, but I think the layout's being ignored. Let's see. With text, layout element. Let's try this. Why is it not showing up? Transform. Container. Oh, I actually broke it. So you see, this is the reason. Oh, I see. Actually, you see the container's not being used at all right now because this is set on null. So this is actually a good case. So just reassign this, and now it works. There we go. So this it needs to be assigned because for the container template to work, it needs to know where stuff goes. So if I change the label, I'm gonna make it smaller. So now I have like the template here, and this is another important part of the templating system. The item interfaces, all of the, you can use the interface, it all sort of like propagates through. So for example, if the the feed slider interface asks to go into a container, the container gets instantiated, and the same item name that goes into the feed slider interface that you can assign here, the same data will also be provided to like whatever container interface there is. So what I can do is I can point this to the label of the text. If I go here and I have the content, so I will just point it here. Now this works. Now this fills it like with the proper label. So this way, you know, you can create a container that's aware of like, you know, that like it should have a label for something. And the slider, so if I actually get rid of this on the slider, now it's no longer necessary because the container is what provides the label. And this way you can compose these individual pieces you can compose them like from multiple like elements without having to sort of redefine things like over and over again. The other part is it works the other way as well. So if you need to, you can actually have, I'm gonna show this thing last. Actually, are there any more questions so far? Because I've shown a bunch of other stuff.
I don't think there's any questions.
Yeah, I actually have a question myself.
Yes.
Once we have this instead of, I'm guessing, the pre-release build, and then have our team working on it, is this going to be something that can be even edited by users that are inside of Resonite?
Yes. Yes, you will be able, like, the users will be able to, like pretty much the same way I'm editing this right now, users will be able, like, to take the template and just chuck in their own templates for everything. And you have full control over how everything looks. So, like, people will be
Okay,
able
but
to make their
people would
own
be able to
types of
share those
settings as well.
templates.
Oh, say again, please.
I was just saying, and people would be able to share said templates, and would it be
Yes.
like they would select it in their inventory and heart it type of thing, or do they just drag and drop it through their sort of like how would they go about it?
I'm not sure yet on that one. Like, we can make it so you heart things. We can make it so, like, somebody makes their own facet with the settings, so you can, like, just swap it. That one's still to be determined. But like, what will, like, overall, like, the system, like, it's customizable. Everything's made out of components, same thing as everything else. So, like, by default, it's kind of customizable. The only thing we're gonna determine is, what's gonna be the approach for swapping it for a different one. But that one, I haven't decided yet on the approach there.
Oh, thank you.
This is like low priority and like not in any way going to break the workflow here. But is there a way to preview this in a way that's not just reading the strings for text?
What do you mean? Like, I'm not sure if I understand.
So where it says like mouse settings or like settings dot mouse sensitivity, is there a way to like preview that without the string and just like the normal text or?
So for this is actually another task I would probably need somebody to take. These, so as actually also important point, these are local strings. So, what we'll need to do is actually create strings in the local. I'm looking for it right now. So if I bring the local file over here, I'm actually, hold on. So if I open the local file, I think this should be the right one. No, hold on, build, there we go. So we'll actually need to provide these in the local file. So if I go settings, mouse sensitivity, am I typing it right? Sensitivity, like, have, I can put like a string here. And then if this gets regenerated, you see, like, now it picks it up from the locale.
Oh, okay.
So we'll,
they still have to be made.
yes,
Okay.
this needs to be made. This is another thing I could like use help with, is essentially go through all the settings here and provide proper like local things. There's a good number of them. We'll probably actually I would recommend, because we do have like a number of the old ones. They're still in the local file, so most of them I feel like we can just rename, because this uses a different scheme, like, for the naming of the keys. So like most of the settings should be here. So they probably just need like adjusting other keys, but essentially someone needs to go through that and and rework the local file. The other thing is, the way like this is set up, you see, like, there's actually another thing that the system does for you, is like you don't need to worry about the localization part of it. Because if you just pointed, like, pretty much all I did for the container is I said this is where the string goes. This is where text goes. You don't even need to set up, any of the local driver, everything. Everything's gonna handle for you. You just tell it, this is where the text goes. You specify it on the interface, and all the setup and everything else, like, happens for you. And if I look at the item, I go, so open this up. Well, this one doesn't really have anything. Actually, I'm not gonna dig through because I don't know where it is. So the other part of the system I also wanted to cover is, so the container, it supports, or like the container, like kind of placement, is also recursive. So if, for example, we need to compose multiple parent containers, we can do that as well. So what I could do is like, I'm just gonna take this container item and duplicate it because I don't want to set up one from scratch. I'll delete this label and I'll just call this super container item. And I'm just gonna add a bunch of padding, just change a bunch of things. So it's like this thing. Then I'm gonna change the tint. So I'm gonna make it, I don't know, like this. And what I can do, make sure this is points to the right thing. There we go. So what I can do, the container, it can itself point to another parent container. So I can assign this one here. And now you see, like it's actually nesting them within each other. So you can technically nest them as many ways as you want. So if you want to, like, you know, have containers that are within other containers, you can do it with a system. You can decompose it into as many pieces as you want to. And you can have even multiple types. So for example, I can have another container item over here. Make sure this works. And this one is not gonna have a parent container. I'm just gonna put it, I'm gonna call it lone container item. And say I want sliders to have, like, to be nested in, you know, double containers, but I want the toggles to just be, you know, single one. Or the enums. Hold on, let's see what's here. How do you? I'll do the toggle. So let's say the toggle. You see right now the toggle has the double container thingy. And I'm gonna point it to the lone container instead. Here, there we go, and regenerate this. And you see now it only has a single one. Or, alternatively, I can put it in, like, directly into the super container. Feed item interface. And go back. And you see now this one is actually in this container, is using it directly, whereas everything else has this container, and then that one goes into this one. And if I change the super container, say, like, you know, I change the color here and do this, you know, all of them are reflected as well. So, like, again, I only need, like, for any, like, unique piece of UI, there only needs to be a single definition of it. And everything's gonna get composed on the fly. Is that all good, like, so far, or is there more questions? I do want to cover, like, one more part of the system.
Yeah, so far so good.
Okay. I feel like it'll probably, like, make a lot more sense also, like, once you kind of get to play with it. Because I feel it might be, like, quite a lot at once, but the other part I wanted to cover is, like, the templating system and, like, the composition. It works the other way as well. So, like, the parent one, it essentially instantiates, like, a container that, like, you know, stuff goes into. So you can kind of nest things, and, you know, it provides a need mechanism to do this kind of thing. But for some interfaces, you know, say, I'm just gonna, like, sketch this, like, super quick. For some interfaces, say you have, you know, something like a slider. You have a slider, and you have, like, you know, a template for a slider. The slider also comes with, like, a text box. And maybe you have, you know, some things for here. I'm just doing some random pieces, and, you know, have some number here. You can decompose this one into multiple things as well. So I can, for example, have, you know, the slider part, that's its own template. But also I want, you know, this field where stuff goes to be its own template. So, like, when there's a field that's just a field, it's only gonna have this. You can have maybe like something, and you have this piece here, and it's the same piece. And I don't want to be defining it twice. I don't want to be defining it separately for the slider and separately for whatever this other piece is. You can compose things as children as well. So let's say I want to do that for the sliders here. So I have a slider. What I'm gonna do is, if I go to data feed slider, I can let's see. So a vertical layout. I'm gonna keep it vertical. I'm not gonna make it too complicated, but I do want to add. I don't want to add a text like a text field. So like there's not only just the visual slider, but there's like there's a text field where I can adjust the value. So literally all I need to do is I need to add a nested item, and I can point it to another interface. So I can grab the interface I already have for the data feed value field, and I just drop this here, and then I say where it needs to go, and it just goes into this one because it already has like vertical layout, so it's just gonna pop it below. And now if I compose it, it doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? Oh, did I drop something wrong? Container. There we go. There we go. And you see, now every slider, it also has a text field. The only thing is this text field definition, it also wants the containers. So like, it includes the containers as well, but it became part of this. So like, what would you do normally is like, you would have definition, you would have a template that's specifically for text field, and that would have no containers. And then you could use that text field definition from the slider, so it can go like by itself. And then for the text field being its own item, you would have another one that uses it as a child and says I want to be inside containers. So you have like a lot of like kind of like composition kind of freedom for this kind of system. And lots of like ways to kind of reuse. There's actually one setting I can show that should even work in world space. It's like in profiles, the user height. So you see like everything's like linked up automatically. There's also some settings like this where we'll probably have more special handling. Right now it's just like a number which represents like meters, but there's gonna be more specialized type of item that says, this is like a distance unit. So we'll have like, specialized UI for that. But if the specialized UI is missing, it just defaults back, to whatever the more basic type is. So does this also like make sense?
Yeah,
like-
I think so.
Okay.
Great.
And we have this video too to like look
Yeah.
back, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that was gonna be a good one. The main thing I wanted to do is like, it's sort of like a crash course of like on how the system works, and what I would like want you to do at this point is I've pushed this build to the pre-release branch on Steam. So if you switch to that branch, you'll be able to like, go, you can create this testing world. You can open this up and you can start messing with it. And first, like I just wanted to kind of, get familiar with the system. Oh my god, it keeps how fast mouse go. I want to get kind of familiar with the system, try messing with it, try, making like templates, see how it works. Once you kind of become familiar, we'll start building out the actual templates for these items. So for example, the containers, and we can kind of go over, like what the containers needs to have. Because for each like of these individual settings, like like each individual piece of setting, like in the, let me see where I have the sketch of it. I just get somewhere. Individual setting, you know, like you have like the setting name, but it's also gonna be additional like buttons. There's gonna be, for example, a button to create like overrides. There's gonna be a button to provide help, and like what I kind of imagined the system doing is, you know, because I want the settings to be like much more like accessible to users. So each item, not only it has a name, but it can have like a description which sort of describes, you know, how it works. And maybe there's gonna be, you know, like a little question mark or something. You know, I've got like your item. And if the user clicks the question mark, you know, maybe we'll have it so it expands. You know, like a item, and maybe now there's, you know, some description. This is what this does. So that would be like, you know, one of the functionalities. The other thing I would want us to do for each of individual pieces of setting is, you know, have something like a sort of grabbable area. And, you know, and there's like lots of ways to do it. Maybe like, you know, it's going to be like a button. Maybe there's going to be like, you know, like a thing here that you grab. Maybe it's here. Maybe it's, you know, over here. Oh, jeez. Didn't mean to do that. You know, maybe it's like over here. Maybe it's like, you know, something completely else. But essentially a part where you can grab it. And when you grab it, it grabs a facet of that setting. So you can then, you know, you can, if you're adjusting, say, your like multimedia volume frequently, you can grab a piece and you can just, you know, you can put it on your home and place it there. Or like once we have like, you know, more places, when you can, you know, place facets on your avatar, for example, or your viewport or things like that, you can, you know, take individual pieces of the settings and just customize everything. And for this kind of functionality, that's still something I'm kind of working on to provide the pieces for that. But one of the reasons I've designed the system this way, you know, so you can kind of compose the containers, is so like we only need to do it once. We just provide, you know, we create a single container where the setting goes and place all the buttons there. And that way, like, you know, we don't need to like, we don't need to update every single individual template. We want to update, you know, the toggles, we want to update the sliders, the value fields, and whatever other pieces of like UI with like these changes is defined in a single place. And we'll probably go a little bit more into detail how that functionality is going to be achieved, how the system is going to be structured and so on. But right now I just wanted to try messing with the system, see if we can, you know, make like a nicer template for the containers, make nicer template for like the sliders, so like, you know, they're looking nice, do like, you know, ones for toggles and so on. Essentially go over whatever types are defined here, you know, and try to messing with these. There's gonna be more as time kind of goes, and as I kind of continue working on the system, but it should be like a good enough to kind of, you know, get you started on this. Is there any more questions with that, or do you feel like you're good enough, like in a good enough state that you can kind of get started like messing with the system?
For me, at least, I think this is good enough.
Okay.
Yeah, just ping us wherever you post this video too.
Yes. Okay, so for next steps, like, you know, like once I post the video, start like messing with it to see like, you know, what it can do, and then we'll gonna get to the next steps, because the next step is gonna be you're pretty much gonna do a similar thing, you know, with the templates, say for example for video. So the template, one more thing, I would request that the template that you make it a completely like separate object. Right now it's bundled into the whole setting thing, but it doesn't need to be. So like all of these, like they can, you know, you can put them like wherever. And if you like separate the templates out, that makes it easy to like, you know, instantly adjust the template. We save it to, you know, to some like predefined location in the inventory where it's gonna be spawned from, and it makes it easier to like work with. But right now, like, you know, the only way to mess with it nicely and see the results is in this world. But I'll make a change very soon where I'm gonna say it's gonna be loaded from this point in the, you know, in the inventory for these settings as well. So you can also, you know, you can actually see it like working. It's probably gonna come like in one of the next builds. There's actually one more type that I also want to go over. So you can notice that a lot of these settings, they're sort of grouped as well. There's, for example, in general control settings, and there's, you know, two types of settings there you can see. There's mouse settings and has number of settings. The way this works, the data feed system, it supports grouping. And this is also done like dynamically. So the items, as they're kind of generated, like, you know, they say, I belong to this group, or I belong to this group. And to provide UI for the grouping, you can find there's a type data feed group, and there's a feed group interface. The way groups work is very similar to like the nesting. So if I look at the data feed group, you see there's text. The text is pretty much like the header of the group. So that's the yellow text you see over there. So if I, for example, you know, change this to this, and I regenerate this, you know, now it's different. So it's pretty much the same thing. It's the template. There's a feed group interface, and it's also using child container. So even though this one isn't being utilized as the parent container, like it's not being referenced this way, because this one represents a group, the child container still, you know, says this is where all the children will go. This is where all the items that should be part of this container item, this is where you need to place them. And you see there's like, you know, vertical layout on it, so we can, you know, we can customize the spacing this way. So if I change this, for example, to have bigger spacing, you see now there's like more space between them. And again, it's defined in a single place. I don't need to, you know, I don't need to like go and hunt like dozens of different values, or I don't need to like, you know, value drive them like from a single place. I just change the template and it just sort of, you know, it propagates through. Well, now it's too much. There we go. So it's pretty much similar thing. You can define however the group like looks like. It's completely kind of, you know, in control how you make that look. This is, you know, it's just a sample, like, you know, to test the code, but like you don't need to specifically, you know, constrain yourself to this like particle look when you're like experimenting with it. So I think that should cover about everything for now. There's gonna be more stuff because I'm gonna be working on some more functionality. For example, there's, you know, stuff like enums, and right now it's just using the enum editor. But if you also feel that like for achieving certain types of you know, like pieces of UI, you would need new general functionality, you know, feel free to make those requests. As part of like the settings work, like a lot of stuff like that's being added. And one of the things I'll probably end up implementing is sort of like modal overlays for enums, so you can, which will then also like use in other places. So you can pretty much, you know, put like a button there and the user clicks it and it takes care of like, you know, generating the UI for the individual enum items, and it'll do it for you. But that's not present yet, so it's just using this one, which is not the most ideal one, but it works for the best. There's also gonna be additional types of items. I still need to sort out how it's gonna work technically, because some things, like if I go to audio, you see you cannot actually change your audio device. The only thing that's visible is whether it should use the system default. But changing the actual audio device, that's a more complex item, because it's not represented by a single field, but it's actually like more complex kind of collection of things. So that needs additional kind of work on my side to like make it possible to like generalize that UI. So there's one thing you'll have to kind of wait on. And then we'll kind of, you know, go over in the future. There's like one more little thing I want to mention as well. This is more of a detail, but one thing I want the sliders to also do, and I've already added like a thing for it. you can see the sliders have a reference value. And what this does is like, it's inspired like if you look in the Windows settings UI, audio input settings, is this here? You see like some of the sliders in Windows, and like there's like other apps that do it too. Like as I talk, there's a reference value. So you can sort of like, see like what is happening there. And this is pretty much what that is. You can set up a visual where if the feed item, provides a reference value, you can display it. So that's what this is specifically. And if you set it up, I'll probably make it like work at least for like the stuff like master volume, maybe for the microphone as well. So it'll look nice and fancy. But yeah, it's I'll give you like a lot of information. I'll post this video. I'll ask if there are like any last questions before I finish the video.
I think we're good.
Okay. So thank you very much for watching and listening. Like I'll hope like you have fun like playing like with the system, and let me know like if there's like any like also like feedback on this, like any issues you kind of run into like working with the system. And we'll probably have more meetings and iteration on this. I might even create like a channel or GitHub or something so we can kind of go back and forth as the system develops. I'll post you updated like because I'll be pushing new pre-release builds as I keep like adding more functionality to the system. And I'll let you know. So thank you very much again. I'm gonna end the video now.